Right, so this is Meet NVivo, publishing faster with NVivo 11 for Windows. Just want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Stuart Robertson, and I am an NVivo consultant and trainer. I've been working with NVivo for 15 years now, so that I started with NVivo 2 during my own doctoral work, and have been with it ever since. I found it to be a helpful tool whether I was doing my research or putting together some of the articles that I've written and had published, most of which are dealing with qualitative data analysis, which seems so apropos. So I'm pleased to be with you today. To share with you some of the tools that I've found and others that I've worked with have found helpful in thinking about NVivo and using it in the realm of publication and thinking of writing for publishing. NVivo 11 for Windows, which is the focus of today's session, actually has 3 different versions, Starter, Pro, and Plus. The versions that have the tools that we'll be looking at today will be Pro and Plus, so that our focus today will be on those 2 particular ones. For those of you who may not be familiar with NVivo, NVivo is often referred to as a qualitative data analysis software product, but I prefer to think of it more broadly in the idea of it's a tool for working with unstructured non-numeric data to help you from organization through being able to pull information that you've gathered out of the tool itself to help substantiate or move forward your writing process. There are a number of file types that you can work with in NVivo Pro and Plus, from Word documents to PDFs, looking at surveys or even bibliographic software, audio, video, and sometimes this has been helpful because there may be an audio or video piece that discusses the topic that you're about to undertake writing about, and it's nice to be able to pull in information in both a text-based and other formats as well. It's also nice because NVivo will work with Zotero, Mendeley, RefWorks, and EndNote, so that if you have files in those particular bibliographic softwares, you can bring that those articles and that information into NVivo to be able to work with it right inside of your single project. Today, what I just wanted to talk about briefly was reference management software, thinking about being able to bring in that information. Smart reading tools, I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go forward. I wanted to mention the idea of nodes and the structure of nodes as we're looking at this. If you're not familiar, I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go forward. But for those of you who might have used NVivo for some research, the way you think about your nodes is oftentimes different when you're thinking about it from a publishing standpoint. Want to talk about the idea of memos and see also links. Those are 2 things. Memos often get touched on in a lot of other formats, but they really hold the key when you think about getting ready to publish. And the see also link, which often gets overlooked, actually has a very powerful use in this type of structure. And finally, taking a look at the framework matrix and how it can have a role in preparing for the writing process. When you think about NVivo and you kind of look behind the curtain, as they say, regardless of what you're about to undertake, there always is a period of gathering information together. Then being able to import that into, in this case, into NVivo, into that format for you, and be able to explore, analyze, organize that data, and think about ways when appropriate to visualize, and then finally share this information as you're heading forward. And right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to swap out for a moment over into NVivo here. And I'll minimize this. I am using NVivo Pro for this particular session today. If you are not as familiar with NVivo, but you're looking at this workspace and you're thinking, gee, it looks awfully familiar to me. NVivo's workspace was modeled after Office and in particular Outlook, so that a lot of the usage skills that you've gained in those areas are able to come right over into your work with NVivo. When you're working within NVivo, all of the work that you do, that you bring into your project, is placed inside the internals folder. Oftentimes when we're working on an article, there may be literature that we're using or articles that we're using. Oh, nice reminder to save my work here. You may also be using data that you've collected. So you could create, if you had information from interviews, information from focus groups that you were looking at, being able to create a folder structure under internals that will help you organize that information. In this case, I've brought in a couple of sample articles to give you a sense of how that can work. If you do have your information in one of the bibliographic softwares, under the Data tab, you do have the ability to bring in from other sources, EndNote, Mendeley, RefWorks, and Zotero. Basically what you do is you export the file. Recently I've been spending more time with Zotero so that I would export select the articles that I want to be focused on, export them from Zotero as an RIS file, .ris, and then bring them into NVivo through the Data tab here. RefWorks and Mendeley also work with the .ris. EndNote works with the .xml files. But you can bring in that information. I know I can bring in the articles. If I have notes, I can bring in my notes and they will be brought in and placed in the memos file. Oh, RIS, thank you. .ris, I'm sorry, I was thinking, I was back in my reading is fundamental days. I taught elementary school for 23 years. Reading is fundamental. .ris, thank you. And that would be for, again, for Mendeley, RefWorks, and Zotero. Once you have those would be the files that you're sending out from your EndNote from Zotero. Those are the bibliographic data that you're bringing in the .ris. The articles themselves will come in a PDF format so that you're able to work with them in that particular format. But in order to bring in the bibliographic data, because you may want to, once you get articles into NVivo, you may want to be able to find articles that were published before a certain date or prior to a certain year. Being able to bring those pieces in can be very helpful in being able to look at and sorting and structuring the work that you're bringing in to your project. Once you get the information inside of NVivo, depending on your familiarity with it, you can certainly begin or working with it on a number of different levels. One of the things that I want to talk about structure-wise is the idea of nodes. For those of you who are not familiar with nodes, you can think of a node as a bin. It's a place where, if I were in the paper and pencil world, I could cut apart my, photocopy my articles, my interviews, cut them apart and put little snippets into bins based on the topic in which I'm interested. And that's exactly what nodes do. They act as those bins, so that later on, when I want to think about a particular concept or theme, you can open up that bin and see how that concept or theme has been talked about across a number of sources, across a number of different articles by different authors as you're looking at this information, this data. Oftentimes when you're thinking about nodes from more of a research perspective, you begin putting the nodes together typically by themes. Themes and sub-themes that you're wanting to look at. But when you're thinking about using NVivo from more of a publishing aspect, one of the suggestions I would make is perhaps arranging the nodes the way you see your paper being structured, your final output, your final article or such. So for example, in the nodes folder, I may actually create a node here to start with that I'll refer to as section 1. And in this case, I'm using some of my professional readings out of elementary science teaching. That's one of the things that I adjunct in the area of preparing elementary science teachers. So if I'm putting together an article in section 1, I might create nodes for the key concepts that I know that I want to talk about. So I can right-click and I'll create a new node here. One of the things that I do is I will use like 1_1, and perhaps I'm looking at student attitude towards science. And maybe the other piece that I'll be looking at would be their 1_2 self-determined abilities in the area of science. So this is a different way of thinking about this structure. The reason that I like using the numbers first is NVivo wants to alphabetize everything. What I found was if I can keep this structure going, creating section 2 and topics that are in there, then I can when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the outline of my final product as I'm going through this entire process. And I'm also organizing things to very quickly get to the information I want depending on the section of the article I'm writing. I'm going to put up I'm going to just start another section here very quickly so that I'll go with section 2. And under that, just quickly, I'll do a new node 2. And I use the underscore because NVivo doesn't like a lot of the fancy other pieces in titles. So 2.1, and I'll go student engagement. So as I'm thinking about this, as you're looking at this, think about the structure. Those of you who might have worked with NVivo before, think about the structure of the nodes slightly differently when you're looking at that particular piece. That being said, let me come back to my sources here for a moment. One of the things I mentioned in the agenda was the idea of having tools to help you be more focused in the reading of the articles. One of the things that you may wish to do is locate keywords in the articles that you, topics that you want to focus in on. Depending on the amount of articles you have, you may have read them, you may have just looked at the abstracts to start out with and to get a sense of what's in there. So one of the tools under the query headings would be the text search query. This can often help you find some of those key terms and be able to then focus your attention in those areas to get started. In this case, I'll use all my sources, but one of the things that I wanted to look at was the idea of student engagement. So I'll put in student engagement. With NVivo, I can look for just those terms. If I've placed in other words, I could look for stemmed words. So for example, inquiry. I might want to use stemmed words to look for inquired, inquiry, inquires, to see if there are other forms of the word that still may be conceptually tied to what I'm looking for. There's also the option to use levels of synonyms, just a very broad open synonym. Use specialization, so you try to find more specialized meanings of the word. So for example, the example here is that the very open might be speak. If you were looking for the word talk, a synonym might be speak, whereas specialization would be whisper. Generalization would be communicate. So NVivo does have a built-in thesaurus. The thesaurus is a closed thesaurus so that you cannot change the words, but this is a way to broaden out how you interact with your information, and you may be made aware of some alternative terms that maybe hadn't crossed your mind at the very beginning. In this case, I'm going to go with student engagement. I'm not going to spread any of the coding yet. I just want to get a sense of what's there. I can go ahead and run this query. And in this case, it's telling me which article had some information about that, how many times that was term came up. Because I had spread the coding to none, sometimes you want to get a quick overview. The word tree is a great way to see how that word or phrase is being used across all of the different sources where it was found, and being able to see them all in one place. What's also nice about this is I can then turn this into a node and begin working with this information. Typically when I'm ready to do that, I will ask NVivo to take a look at, say, the narrow context of what's around, and I'll rerun this query here. Oh, I apologize. I have an unreported problem that popped up here. Let me see if I can cancel and come back into this. Okay. Apologize here. Typically, this is not, for those of you who aren't familiar with NVivo, very rarely do I get issues like this. So let me come back in very quickly here. But what it allows me to do is if I can find that word, I can go into my articles. NVivo will highlight that word for me, and I can scroll through the article and see how it's being used. And at that point, I can also allow myself to take and make the coding more specific to what I'm looking for. So let me come back into it. And see if I can have a little bit more success here. So let me do my text search query and engagement. I'll do engagement just to see. I'll run that query. Okay, opening it up a little bit more, I've got a few more references here. So it went beyond student engagement, and I may want to do that to get a sense of what else might be there. As I said, I can save these results. And one of the things, oftentimes we've talked about creating a new node, but this is a time period where I have an existing node where I would like this information to go. So I can merge the results into an existing node, and oh, that's right, when it went down, I apologize. I lost my node that was there. So we will go create the results as a new node. And it was section 2.1 was engagement. Now it's showing me a little bit of the area around where this word is being used. What I like about this is now I can use the link back to the original source. It will highlight for me, and I can then adjust the coding and be able to code the amount that I think is appropriate. So this is talking about sense making through engagement and explanation construction. So once I've done that, I can highlight that text, and I can right click if I wish. Let me come back up here. And I can code that to the existing node, or if I want, let me come back here for a second here, be able to show my nodes over on this side. One of the things I can do is I can drag and drop it into that node. So now I'm beginning to see that I'm able to expand what I have inside of the node so that I can then come back in and start to take a look at where this information might be heading. If I come across the fact that there's examples that might not fit what I'm looking for inside of NVivo, I can highlight and I can uncode. I can uncode that information. And be able to pull that information out. So this way, when I want to focus my reading, I can focus on particular areas in the articles. I can create the nodes to collect the information that's specifically about that topic. And when I'm ready to write or think about it, I can then open up that node and be able to see exactly just the data that I have for that particular purpose. Along those same lines, in thinking about getting ready for the writing, there may be time periods when you are reading a particular passage and in your head you start formulating what you want to say. This is a place where you can utilize memos and also see also links, which is something that doesn't get talked about with much frequency. But let me start out with the memos part of this. While I'm reading or even going through a node that is equivalent to a particular section, in my sources area, I can create a memo. I'll go ahead and create a memo here. I'm going to call this, I could call it by section, I could call it by topic, engagement. And as I'm looking at the information, as I'm seeing the pieces here, so that we're looking at the idea of hands-on engagement and construction of meaning based on the students. So I may, the comfort level of the teacher around the topic area impacts the knowledge gained from student constructed responses. One of the things you can do is I can link to the article. I can create a memo link to the article if I wish. So oftentimes in research we'll take and link a memo to, say, a particular data source. In this case, I'm thinking about it more in terms of the future of writing this section. And one of the things that I might want to do is come back to my article or my node, either or. I can then right-click and copy this particular passage here. Go ahead and highlight it again. And I'll go ahead and copy it. Now I'll come back to the memo and I'll highlight what I wrote in response to that, what it jarred in my thinking. And again, I can right-click and I can paste, but this time I'm going to paste a See Also link. Slightly different because if I'm, instead of copying and pasting it into the memo, which you certainly can do, that is definitely an approach that people take. But I wanted to share this paste as a See Also link because it does, within the NVivo program itself, it does show me that I have put a see also link here. It lets me know if I click on it where it's coming from. And again, I can double click and open up and see it. However, the piece that oftentimes people don't realize is that if I have this memo that I've created these see also links with, if I right click and I export that memo, and I make sure that my see also links are going to be there, and I export it as a Word document, when I send it out to Word, and hopefully it will open shortly here. There we go. Not only does it send out what I've written, but it sends out the quotes. And I know where they're coming from. And now I have, in a Word format, the data that I need. I can now start to write around this. Sending that information out very nicely, being able to see those parts. You can link more than one quote to a passage like I did here from different sources. You can have more than one linked, see also link here. So this is a tool that can be really, really helpful, and yet it's one of the lesser known pieces as you're looking at NVivo. But let me come back in here. And one of the things too is this is one way that I could begin the writing process in NVivo, be able to be writing and linking to my data, and then send it out to Word for some finalizing, some cleaning up, putting in the citations and things such as that. The other tool that I wanted to make with this, point out to you with this, was the idea of the framework matrix. One of the things with the framework matrix is it does require the use of something called cases. And cases are just, think of them as nodes that are built around a particular, typically we say unit of your analysis. In this example, I would build it around an author. So if I'm looking at, let me come back to my articles here, or so I have Zangori, Forbes, and Biggers. So what I might do is back in my node section, I'll create a case, and let's see if I can. I'll create that over, or actually I want to code the whole thing over, so let me create a case here. And one of the things that I can do is any of the articles I have by this author or this author team, I can then come back to their article in my sources, and I can code that article. I can code that whole source. To their case. And now any of the coding that I do to this article will also be reflected in the case itself. So later on, I can go to my framework matrix, and I'll create a new one here. And I can call this, author's comparison. In my rows, I'll go to my cases, so I would select any of the author or author teams that I may have used. And for my columns, I could then select the various nodes. And when I get done here, NVivo will create for me a matrix. Each row represents a different author. Each column would represent a different topic. And because I have them organized by sections of my writing, it helps me to organize my thoughts before I go out maybe and try to put in some final pieces. And I can auto-summarize, and NVivo will put in the data that I've coded. So in this way, I now can have a matrix where I can see how current literature is talking about different topics. I can look down a column and see how the same topic is discussed by different authors. I can look across a row and see how different current authors have talked about different facets of this project. And at that point, I can also begin, even within the cell itself, I can begin adding my own comments. And for example, often what I'll do in the case like that is I'll then just change the color of the font so I can keep better track of those particular pieces. And in essence, what I'm doing here is I'm giving myself a graphic organizer. That is another way that I can export this to Excel and have it right there to be able to start and use for some of my writing. And again, I can organize it by the sections of the article and work my way through it to be able to put some of these pieces together. This is a sampling of some of the tools that, when you think about NVivo, beyond just coding data, when you think about it to help you organize unstructured ideas, including your own thoughts, because you can code your own memos as you go through. You can organize your thoughts and pieces in there. These are definitely ways where when you sit down to write, if you can have your information all right here, to be able to quickly access it without having to be constantly getting up and going somewhere else and getting something or grabbing and moving, the more you can centralize all of this in one place, the faster you're going to be able to make sense of this information and be able to then start using it. So a couple of things, let me just hit upon a couple of more things, and then we'll close out this section, and I'll double check, go to the question section. So I'm just going to come back here for a moment. There are a number of resources with NVivo. We have, QSR has its own YouTube channel. There are user communities, forums within NVivo itself. There's Twitter groups, LinkedIn groups. There's online help documents. And a lot of times we'll give free overview webinars to give you a sense of possibilities that are there so that you can think about how this might be able to help you and assist you. Okay. One of the things that I do like to mention too is that there is a free trial available at QSR, www.QSR International, so that if you wanted to try this out, there's a 14-day free trial there to be able to get a sense of how this might be of assistance in your particular project. All right. So let me go ahead and close this particular section of the session.